All right, let's dive into The MAGA Doctrine, a book by Charlie Kirk that really tries to nail down the core philosophy behind the whole Make America Great Again movement. We're going to break down the key ideas the book presents, straight from the source. So, right out of the gate, the book grabs a common critique of Donald Trump and flips it on its head. The argument here is that this exact image is actually central to his populist appeal. The thinking was, people wanted someone who looked and acted powerful enough to finally go up against other powerful people.
Okay, so let's get down to it. What exactly is the MAGA Doctrine according to this book? Well, it's presented as way more than just a slogan you'd see on a red hat. It's a whole framework for, national renewal. At its very heart, the book defines the doctrine as a massive push to bring back self-governance. The focus is all on protecting the individual, the family, and local communities from what the author describes as these big, overbearing, even tyrannical institutions. And here's who the book says those big institutions are. It frames the opposition not just as big government, but as big everything. It's this whole coalition of powerful forces that, from the book's point of view, have all been working together to crush what it calls real America. So, that's the opposition. Now let's look at the central problem the book identifies, which it sees as a broken political system that was just completely stuck in the mud and needed a serious shakeup. The book introduces this idea of a two-party cartel. It claims that for years, sure, Democrats and Republicans would put on a big show of fighting in public, but behind the scenes, they were quietly cooperating on things they both wanted, like, for example, more and more government spending. And this slide really breaks down what the book calls the two old, tired formulas voters were being offered. You had the Democratic version on one side, the Republican version on the other. But look closely at what they have in common. The argument is that no matter who you voted for, you ended up with a bigger government and constant military interventions overseas. And this is where the book presents Trump as the great disruptor. The whole idea is that he just shattered this comfortable arrangement with a totally new formula, one that combined things like strategic protectionism with a fierce defense of free speech and a real skepticism of foreign wars. It's a combo the book claims really connected with voters who felt totally left behind. So that setup leads us right into the first part of the solution laid out in the book, a complete rethinking of America's role on the world stage. The foreign policy part of the doctrine starts with a pretty simple principle. You have to end the endless wars. The argument is that these conflicts have been a massive drain on American lives and money for decades, with almost nothing to show for it back home. And to really illustrate the kind of waste it's talking about, the book highlights this one wild example, the Kabul Grand Hotel. Get this, the U.S. government spent $85 million to build it. And the result? An empty, unfinished building. For the author, this one project is the perfect symbol of totally messed up priorities and wasted taxpayer money. The book also points to numbers like these, showing that the U.S. spends way more on its military than its main rivals combined. 3 times China, 10 times Russia. So the question it asks is, why is all this intervention necessary? The proposed alternative is pretty blunt. Ask our allies to start paying their fair share for their own defense. Now, this is a really important clarification the book makes. America first, it argues, doesn't mean America alone. The idea is that every single country should be guided by its own national interest. In other words, France should be France first, Japan should be Japan first, and so on. And that America first approach to the world connects directly to the second part of the solution, a plan to get the domestic economy roaring again. So, how did this new economic approach actually play out, according to the book's scorecard? Well, it points to several key numbers, starting with job creation. The text highlights over 5 million new jobs, presenting this as direct proof that the shift in economic policy was working. The book also argues that this prosperity wasn't just for a select few. It makes a point of highlighting record low unemployment rates for minority groups. For example, it cites a 5.9% unemployment rate for Black Americans, noting that at the time it was the lowest level ever recorded. A huge piece of this economic puzzle was just a massive rollback of regulations. The book gives this pretty stunning ratio. For every one new regulation that was created, 22 old ones were thrown out. The goal was to free up American businesses from what the doctrine sees as these costly, growth-killing rules. So the whole overarching idea here is pretty simple. Create an environment where businesses want to set up shop and grow. That means tax cuts and getting rid of red tape.
The ultimate goal was to reverse that decades-long trend of companies and the jobs they provide moving overseas. Okay, so we've touched on the political and the economic, but finally, the book argues that the real battle, the deepest one, isn't about any of that. It's fundamentally a cultural fight.
And to frame what's at stake in this cultural battle, the text asks this really provocative question. It claims that a kind of narrative of national shame has taken over American institutions, and that this is actively weakening the country's confidence in itself. The book's answer to that question is a loud, emphatic no. While it acknowledges that, yeah, America has made mistakes in its history, it argues that the country itself is not a mistake. And in this view, patriotism isn't something to apologize for. It's presented as a totally rational and healthy virtue. So when you boil it all down, the MAGA doctrine is presented as a cultural rejection of decline. It's a fight to replace what the book calls a culture of guilt with a renewed sense of confidence in the nation's values, its pioneering spirit, and its future. And the explainer ends with this one last thought from the book, that this whole thing isn't just about one election or one political figure. It's positioned as a fundamental challenge, a jolt, as it says here, to the globalist order that has shaped our world for decades.